Hello, and thank you for watching this early October 2017 Ag Outlook for Farm Credit Illinois. My name is Eric Snodgrass, and I am the Senior Atmospheric Scientist and co-founder of Agrible Incorporated, and I am also the Director for Undergraduate Studies in Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Illinois. Well, let's begin by taking a look back over the last 45 days. We've got a couple of maps here that show us the statewide average temperature ranks on the left and the statewide precipitation ranks on the right. We're looking at August 2017. Now, because of a deep trough that occupied much of the month of August here across the eastern two-thirds of the country, we saw some rather chilly weather here for August in the middle part of the country. In fact, Illinois ranked as our 10th coolest August on record. Now, meanwhile, the West was just scorched, having their hottest month of August on record. And that number that you see there in California, Washington, and Oregon, that actually tells you the record we're talking about here. So this is a 123-year record, Illinois 10th coolest. Jump over to precipitation. We had our 19th driest August on record. And it's important to see this because this had a big impact on our fall harvest efforts. So let's take a look at one particular location and talk about what's going on in Champaign, Illinois. So this is a graph that shows you from August 1st all the way until October 3rd, what the temperatures look like compared to average, so these are highs and lows, and every precipitation event. Now look, August begins here and goes to about right there, and what you can see is that most of the month saw near average or below average temperatures, hence having our 10th coolest on record. No big spikes in heat is what we saw. That cooler weather carried over into September as well. The beginning part of September was quite chilly. But once we got to about September 13th, 14th, we saw a rebound in our temperatures, primarily due to a big ridge that set up across the eastern part of the country. And we saw temperatures like we normally expect to see in July happening in September, temperatures in the 90s. But what I really want you to hone in on here is to see that over this entire time period, again, August 1st all the way to October 3rd, we only had 3 precipitation events in Champaign where we even got close to a ½ inch in total from each event. So this was a very, very dry last couple of months, and that's an important thing to think about as we kind of head into this very busy time for harvest. To look at it kind of in map form, you see it like this. This is showing us the last 30 days of precipitation expressed as a percent of normal, and I created this map early in the morning on October 3rd. Now, some parts of the state of Illinois right here are between 10 and 60% of average rainfall. In fact, if you just look at the eastern part of the Corn Belt, we see a pretty similar pattern. Well, why has the western part of the Corn Belt been so wet where they've had some serious delays in their harvesting efforts? Well, that's primarily been due to a deep trough that sat right here over the western United States, whereas the east has been under a rather large ridge. It's between a trough feature and a ridge feature that you tend to get a lot of precipitation. And we have to keep an eye on this because this heavier rain here is moving toward the east for this end of the first week of October and into the second. So we'll keep an eye on that and take a look at it in just a few seconds. But again, very, very dry across the state of Illinois. That's had an impact on our river systems too. Check this out. This is showing you the LaGrange Lock and Dam current water level as of early in the day on October 4th. It was at 6.1 feet. Now, flood stage is 23 feet, so we're, 17 feet below that. So this is causing some issues. They're not able to basically weigh down the barges with lots and lots of grain so that they don't bottom out, and it's causing some trouble getting that grain shipped out. So this is just one of the consequences of having such a dry August and September as we roll into October here. Well, moving on, we do have precipitation on the way. So I made this video midday on October the 4th, and this animation you're watching, which is playing over again here, is showing this boundary that's finally moving across the state of Illinois, and it's going to give us repeated chances for showers and storms getting into Thursday, Friday, Saturday of this week. So this is getting into the end of the first week of October. We can also see that coming up out of the Gulf of Mexico is another tropical system. This one's not nearly as strong as we've seen with Harvey and Irma and Maria, but it's certainly showing us that the tropics are still active. Well, this is going to be a big break over what we've seen recently for the state of Illinois. We're seeing finally some precipitation moving through, and that's one thing I want you to key in on here. I think we're going to be seeing over the month of October a pretty highly varied weather pattern, moving from trough to ridge, bringing in precipitation, then followed by a drier period through the entire month. In fact, that's kind of illustrated in this animation. I love to look at these maps because they show me the flow of the atmosphere and what that means for our temperatures. So let's let it kind of start over here and let's talk about the end of this week. What you're seeing here is the forecast on the 6th of October, so that's Friday. In the evening, we're going to have a pretty sizable trough still moving through the center part of the country. And that's why we have unsettled weather out ahead of this, albeit warm, but unsettled weather, quite a bit of precipitation moving in through this area. As we continue to step through, what I really want to see here is by the time we get through this coming weekend, starting into the second full week of October, we are starting to see another pretty large trough moving through the central states. My concern here is that as that trough moves through out ahead of it, right where I'm kind of drawing, we will be able to see more precipitation. And this is going to drag a pretty big cold front through us sometime around Tuesday, October 10th. And why I bring that up is because anytime we see a trough like this coming through Illinois and it's mid-October, that's a good indicator that we might possibly get an overnight low that reaches down toward that freezing point. At this stage, it's kind of too early to call if we're going to hit a freezing temperature by the time that front comes through early in the second full week of October, but I'm watching it very, very carefully. Now, as we keep going with the forecast, let me just kind of give you a broad perspective on October on the whole. We are seeing that with time, the western United States will probably favor, when you average the whole month out, a cool bias, whereas the eastern half of the country will kind of contain a warm bias. Because of the two troughs that are coming through the flow in the next, call it 10 to 15 days, we're going to have a few different chances in there to have some showers and potentially some storms coming across this part of the Corn Belt, which means we are at times going to be a little bit wetter across the state of Illinois, which is a big break over what we've seen recently. We're going to be dry on either side of that. At least that's what some of the longer range guidance suggests, some drier conditions here in the far west and then over the southeast. But with anytime we're talking about the southeast during the tropical season, any would-be storm that comes up there can erase that forecast very quickly. Now, what I want to make sure you hear when I say this is that even though I say wetter at times, remember October is one of our drier months. So don't be thinking that this is going to be just an absolute washout. We will get harvest in during those drier times, but I think we're going to be seeing more precipitation events than we saw in August and September. And also, I know I said cool here and wet and warm on this side. This is going to be a pattern that's going to transition a lot. You just saw how we're going to see frequent troughs and ridges moving through. So don't get hung up on the forecast getting stuck like this. This is the overall pattern for the whole month of October. We have noticed, by the way, that over the last 100 years that our fall temperatures in Illinois have been warming with time, which means a later and later frost date. But our typical frost date for the center part of the state is around mid-month. So that would be a normal frost time here for the central part of the state of Illinois. Well, let's stretch this out and look longer term. One of the big players I'm keying in on here for our winter is the development of a weak La Nina, and that's seen in these cooler than average sea surface temperatures. Now, La Nina is not the only dominant factor that affects Illinois winters. We have to watch out what's going in the Bering Sea, the Gulf of Alaska, the Hudson Bay, south of Greenland, where we have what's called the North Atlantic Oscillation. All of those features tend to set up our week by week kind of overall flow pattern of the jet stream, and they're way too hard to forecast months in advance. But this La Nina kind of gives me a bit of a clue to suggest that the Illinois winter will not be as warm or as dry as winter 2016 into 2017. So the chances of us having a more normal winter, especially across the whole of the northern tier of the United States, is much, much, much higher than it was a year ago. So we're going to have to keep a close eye on that. Typical La Nina patterns tend to bring a little bit more northwest flow. We tend to be snowier, and we also tend to be a little bit cooler. And we can see here in the forecast that we're tending to be trending more toward that weak La Nina slash what we call INSO-neutral pattern as we get into our winter months and early spring. I'll tell you one thing as we wrap this video up though. Who this tends to impact the most is Brazil. Brazil's already had a bit of a delay in their planting due to some early season dryness, and La Nina tends to produce drier overall conditions for the Brazilian and Argentinian crop, which means they could take a slight hit on their yields this year for soybeans and push that safrinha crop later into the season. But I want you to know something. Every year, Brazil plants around 600,000 new hectares of land, which means that even if they do take a slight hit on their yields, the new land that's being planted will help bring up their total production. So I expect Brazil, despite maybe having some adverse weather this spring and summer, they will probably still see a big production season for their soybeans. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. We at Farm Credit Illinois thank you for your attention. Hope you look forward to our next update. Thank you.